see anybody real. I see one person moving. Can anybody hear me? Okay. All right. What I was saying is I apologize for getting started a little bit late this morning. We're just working through some issues. I appreciate everybody being here on a timely basis. Before we get started, I just want to make sure you all understand the process that we're about to move through and also understand how much the court appreciates you being here. I understand that when most of you got up this morning, and this happens with all jury service, most folks aren't really looking forward to coming down to the court for jury service. I get that. And in a case like the case that we're addressing here, I believe that is probably a heightened issue, that there are concerns about coming to the courthouse, that there are a lot of unknowns associated with jury service here, and I get that. Let me just say that the court is doing everything it can to ensure that this process moves smoothly and efficiently, and also that during this process that you as potential jurors remain anonymous, and that the information that we gather is used simply for the process that we're going through now, which is jury selection. And I realize that coming from that information or insight coming from the court may not resolve any concerns that you have about being here, but I do hope it at least gives you an understanding that we understand those concerns and we'll work through them. But we are going to be picking a jury in this case, and you are now a participant in that process. We can't do what we do in Superior Court without members of the community coming down, and you are now an integral part of this case. And as such, I'm going to give you some instructions as we move forward. What we're going to be doing, though, this morning is, again, trying to work through the selection process. It's a process called voir dire, and it's very simple. What's going to occur is that first the state and then the defense in this room are going to be asking you what we call general questions. Those general questions are intended to help the lawyers determine whether or not you can be a fair, unbiased, impartial juror that is honestly seeking the truth in this case. But effectively that you will be able to listen to the evidence presented in the Superior Court and be able to make a decision, reach a verdict based upon the evidence presented in the court. It's a very simple process. Some people, it makes sense that they sit on the panel. Others, for various reasons, it may not make sense. And this process is intended to figure out who the right jurors would be for this case. During the process, you may be asked questions that you feel a little uncomfortable responding to. I do ask that you volunteer as much information as you can. And if you feel uncomfortable volunteering information to a question, let us know, and we can figure out a way. If you don't feel comfortable responding in front of the group or otherwise, we will work through that process and make sure that you're able to give full, honest answers to any question in a way that makes you feel comfortable. During the process, you are going to be referred to by number. That's the number on your chest. Okay, we don't use names in this court. The lawyers are going to be using numbers. The court's going to be using numbers. It's a very impersonal way of addressing individuals. That it's the instruction the lawyers have been given by the court. That's the way we're going to do it, because everything you say, everything I say, and everything the lawyers say is going to be taken down by the court reporter who's sitting over here to my left. She needs to hear everything that is being said. So please speak up. The acoustics in this room aren't terribly good, but they're not awful. We can normally hear everything that's going on. But at some point, if I ask you to speak up, my apologies for interrupting you in advance. We just need to go ahead and get you to speak up. As to the process, what we're going to be doing, first thing, is again this general question. So both sides will have an opportunity in this room to ask you some questions. And then what we're probably going to do is break down into what we call individual voir dire, which occurs in the courtroom itself. And what will happen then as we move through this process today, each one of you, or not all of you, but a good number of you, will probably be coming into the courtroom individually for some follow-up questions. The process itself, I think from your perspective, will probably feel like it's taking a while. And there's a lot of sitting associated with the process. But things are moving forward. And I only mention that because I ask for your patience. We do not rush anything in Superior Court. Again, there's going to be some time where you're in here wondering why you're just sitting here. That's just the way the process works. But I do, again, ask for your patience. Based on the way this process is working, I think we're probably going to work through a good part of the day into the afternoon. From a timing standpoint, we'll probably be there with this group. So with that, again, I want to thank you. I don't give a long speech about your obligation to the community and jury service and what you have to do. I just appreciate the fact that you're here. Again, we can't do this without you, and you're participating in something that's important to the court, to the state, and to the defendant. So what we're going to do is, first things first is I'm going to swear you in. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to get right into the questioning itself. So if I could please have you stand and raise your right hand. You shall give true answers to all questions as may be asked by the court or its authority, including all questions asked by the parties or their attorneys concerning your qualifications as jurors in the case of the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William R. Bryan. So help you God. Go ahead and proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the case of the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William R. Bryan, who are charged each individually and as parties concerned in the commission of a crime by the grand jury of Glenn County with the offenses of felony murder in 4 counts. Let me back up. Count 1 is actually murder. Murder in 1 count, felony murder in 4 counts, aggravated assault in 2 counts, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. I'm going to ask you a number of questions. If you could please respond where appropriate. Are any members of this panel related by blood or marriage to Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, William R. Bryan, or Ahmaud Arbery? No responses. Have you, for any reason, formed and expressed any opinion in regard to the guilt or innocence of the accused? Keep your hands up. I've got these tags have some glare on them, so I can't really see the numbers that well. I've got, I think it's 152. 152.
156.
156. 146. And then 161. 164. I can't see your name. 167. 170. 172. 175. And 176. Thank you. I've got 146, 150, 152, 156, 161, 164, 167, 170, 172, 175, 176. Have you any prejudice or bias resting on your mind, either for or against the accused? $150, $172. Thank you. I'm going to ask this question in reverse. Is your mind not perfectly impartial between the state and the accused? $146, $150,
$152.
$152, thank you.
$156.
$156, $158. Okay. Those are the court's statutory questions. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
All right, that was pretty good. All right. My name is Linda Dunikoski, and I'm Assistant District Attorney pro tempore in this case, along with Paul Camarillo and Larissa Oliveira. So I'm going to be asking you some questions. And the first thing I want to tell you is this. If you think it applies to you, it does. So if you go, well, I don't know, yes. Well, maybe, yes. Okay, so here's the thing. Like Judge Walmsley said, we're going to talk to you individually after this. So if you think it applies to you, it's something you think, that might be a thing, raise your card, we'll write it down, and then we'll follow up with you later. Okay? All right. So first thing I want to ask, is there anyone here who does not reside in Glenn County? No cards. Is there anyone here under 18 years of age? No cards. Is there anyone here who has been convicted of a felony and has not had their rights restored to them? No cards. Now, the indictment in this case was returned in June of 2020. Did anyone sit on the grand jury that returned this particular indictment? No cards. Is there anyone here who is a post-certified law enforcement officer with arrest powers? No cards. Is there anyone here who is 70 years of age or older and who does not wish to serve on this jury? 156 and 148? Is there anyone here who is a full-time student currently enrolled in and attending classes? No cards. Is there anyone here who is the full-time caretaker of a child or children under the age of 6 years and you have no other reasonable alternatives for child care if you were selected to be on this jury? 146? In addition, is there anyone here who has is the full-time caretaker for someone who is disabled or elderly and you have no other reasonable alternative for care during the time we're going to be doing this trial? 139? Is there anyone here who has difficulty understanding the English language? No cards. Is there anyone here who has difficulty hearing? 139 and 156. All right, we're going to talk about hardships. Right now, we anticipate this case to last from about now with, and 148, I'm sorry, thank you, 148 for the hearing issue as well. Thank you. We anticipate the trial to last from about now until November 19th, which is the Friday before the week of Thanksgiving. That's a long period of time, okay? And if there is a conflict that's not a work conflict, we're not talking about your employment, we're talking about you have a personal scheduling issue or conflict that you need to bring to our attention, we want to know about it. But this is what we're looking at. You're having open heart surgery next week, that kind of thing. You plan on leaving to go to Vermont for the birth of your first grandchild the 1st of November. Really important, milestone in your life, that kind of thing. If you think you have a scheduling issue that we need to know about, please go ahead and raise your hand for me. All right, so we have
152.
Thank you. I've got 143, 152, 172, 175, and 176. Yes, 143. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a tip. If you want to unclip it and hold it up like this, that would probably help us out with grabbing the numbers if you're comfortable doing that. All right, so is anyone here related by blood or marriage to the current Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney Keith Higgins? Anyone personally know Mr. Keith Higgins? And we have number 150. Is anyone here related by blood or marriage to former District Attorney Jackie Johnson? Anyone know Jackie Johnson personally? 138. The district, oh, I'm sorry, 161. Yeah, you gotta wave at me, I can't see it, thanks. All right. The district attorney pro tempore who has been assigned to this case is the Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Brody. Is anyone related by blood or marriage to Mr. Brody, or do you think you know him personally? No cards. All right. Anyone here know the three of us? No cards. Now, does anyone here have any opinion about last year's election where DA Jackie Johnson was defeated by Keith Higgins for the position of district attorney? Is there any sort of opinion you formed about that particular election or race? 150, 152, and 167. Is there anyone who has an opinion about how or why the Cobb County District Attorney's Office was assigned to prosecute this case by the Georgia Attorney General? 152. Is there anyone here who's going to be unable to give the state a fair trial because we're all from Cobb County, married to Georgia? Is there anyone here who's not going to be able to give the state a fair trial because we don't live here? Is there anyone who has an issue with that? No cards. Is there anyone here who's related by blood or marriage to Waycross Judicial Circuit District Attorney George Barnhill? Does anyone know Mr. Barnhill? No cards. Does anyone know George Barnhill Jr., a former assistant district attorney here in Glen who now practices in Brunswick? Anyone know him? No cards. Does anyone know or are related by blood or marriage to Atlantic Judicial Circuit District Attorney Tom Durden? Does anyone know Tom Durden? No cards. All right, so we've talked about the state. Now, of course, we have the defense. And does anyone here know Mr. Jason Sheffield or Mr. Robert Rubin? No cards. Does anyone here know Mr. and Mrs. Hogue, Laura Hogue and Frank Hogue? No cards. And does anyone here know Mr. Kevin Goff? Now, Mr. Kevin Goff is an attorney locally. Has anyone ever worked with him or had a family member who's worked with him or know of him? You might not know him personally, but you might know of him. And we have
158.
158 and 170 and 172. Does anyone here personally know the defendants Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, or William Roddy Bryan? 161. Does anyone here know Miss Amy Elrod? No cards. Does anyone know, oh, I'm sorry, 172 and 175. All right, so Miss Amy Elrod, that's 172, 175. Anyone else? All right, so Greg McMichael, Travis McMichael. Does anyone know Lee McMichael, Greg McMichael's wife? Does anyone know Lindsay McMichael, Greg McMichael's daughter, Travis McMichael's sister? No cards. Did anyone know Mr. Ahmaud Arbery? 146 and 161. Anyone else? Did anyone here personally know Mr. Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones? No cards. Does anyone here personally know Marcus Arbery Sr., Mr. Arbery's father? And we have, thank you, 164 and 172. Thank you. And does anyone here know Marcus Arbery Jr., Ahmaud's brother, personally? No cards. Has anyone here previously served on a jury? What I mean by that is, you've gone through this process of jury qualification and us talking to you. You've actually been seated, sat in the jury box, listened to all the evidence, and went back and deliberated with other people to come to a verdict. Has anyone been through that particular process? 152, 170, 143, and 172. For the four of you, I'm sorry, 148, thank you. For the five of you, was anyone here the jury foreperson? 152 was the foreperson, 170 was the foreperson. All right. And was anyone on a jury, the five of you with your juries, was that a jury that was able to reach a verdict? If the answer is it was unable to reach a verdict, let me know. Everybody had a verdict. Oh, your jury didn't reach a verdict.
One did, one didn't.
Okay. One did, one didn't. Okay, and that's juror 170. Has anyone ever served on the grand jury, which is different than, a trial jury? No cards. Does anyone here actually know Judge Walmsley, professionally or personally? No cards. All right, so when you were called for jury duty, you were directed to a website, for the clerk of court and everything, and it had some instructions on it. Also listed on that website were some links to some of the documents in this case. It's okay if you looked at it, because it was there, but we all need to know if you looked at it, because there were some documents there that, were on the website. So if you looked at it, let me know. So we have 152. And that's it. Thank you for letting us know. Please raise your hand if you served in the military. So we have 150, 143, 158, 176. Anyone else? Thank you for your service. Does anyone here have prior law enforcement training or prior law enforcement experience? 143, 158, and 167. Does anyone here have a close personal friend or close relative? I don't mean Uncle Bob in Iowa who you haven't seen in 10 years, okay? I'm talking about close personal friend, close family member who's involved in law enforcement. Anybody? All right, so we have 140, 146, 152, 160, 164, 167, 172, and 176. Please raise your card or your hand if you have experience in the field of social work, either as a social worker or in some other field that's social work related. No cards. Please raise your card or your hand if you have any work experience in the field of counseling, psychology, psychiatry, your undergrad degree was in psychology, anything along those lines. No cards. Please raise your hand if you have experience in the legal field, and that can be that you're a lawyer, a paralegal, you've been an assistant in a legal firm, you have some sort of legal training. No cards. Please raise your hand if you have had experience in the criminal justice system. And that doesn't just mean like a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney. I'm also talking about, have you worked at the probation department? Have you gone out and ministered at a prison or done something along those lines where you've been involved within the criminal justice system? 167. Is anyone here related to or have a very close friend who works in a district attorney's office, and that can be anywhere in the nation? 146 and 158, 167.
Can you say these again?
Of course, 146, 158, and 167. Is there anyone here with medical training? And I don't mean you took a CPR class or were a lifeguard in college. I mean you actually have medical training. Anyone? Is there anyone here who's related by blood or marriage or has a close personal friend who is actually a criminal defense attorney? 158. Is there anyone here who personally knows an attorney who works within the criminal justice system, either as a prosecutor or as a criminal defense attorney? 150. Is there anyone here who's had a bad experience with law enforcement such that it sticks out in your mind? 150 and 167. Is there anyone here who's had a good experience with law enforcement such that it sticks out in your mind? 146, 150, 138, 167. Is there anyone here who's had a bad experience with a prosecutor? Here or anywhere else? No cards? Is there anyone here who's had a good experience with a prosecutor? Here or anyone else? Anywhere else? 158. All right, so what we're going to do is now we're going to talk about convictions. Okay, but when we're talking about convictions for crimes, we're talking about something like DUI to something much more serious that can go all the way up to like murder. So we're not talking about traffic tickets or something like that. We're talking about, arrests, convictions, things like that for DUI to something more serious. So first off, have you ever been arrested and or convicted for something like a DUI to something more serious? And we've got 140, 150, 170, and 176. Now I'm going to ask it about your close personal friends and your relations. Anyone have a relative, close personal friend who's been convicted of something like DUI to something more egregious? 139, 140, 146, 148, 150, 156, 164, 167, and 175, 176. Is there anyone here who feels they've been falsely accused of a crime, whether it involved the police or not? You yourself, falsely accused. No cards. Is there anyone here who's had a close relative or close personal friend who's been falsely accused of a crime? 150. Anyone else? All right, so now we're going to talk about being the victim of a crime. Okay? Is there anybody here who feels they've been the victim of a crime against their person? Okay, and that can be, like a violent crime against their person. You yourself have been the victim of a violent crime. No cards. Is there anyone here who has a close friend or family member who's been the victim of a violent crime or a crime against their person? 139, 150, 152, 172. Have any of you ever witnessed a crime in progress? 139, 140, 143, 158, 167. Is there anyone here who's ever taken a cell phone video of a crime in progress? No cards. All right, so we're going to talk now about burglary and home invasion. Burglary is you come home and all your stuff's gone. Home invasion, you're home and the person kicks the door in or you find them standing over your bed, that kind of thing. So burglary, home invasion. Have you ever been the victim of a burglary or home invasion? 139, 156, 164, 170. Close relative, close personal friend who's been the victim of burglary or home invasion. 139, 152, 175. Has anyone here ever had to call 911 to report a crime? I'm not talking about a medical emergency. I'm not talking about, child falling off a swing set, breaking an arm. I'm talking you've had to call 911 because you're reporting a crime. 139, 140, 164. Is there anyone here who's ever had to give a statement to law enforcement? Not talking about a traffic accident kind of statement at the side of the road. I'm talking about giving a statement to law enforcement. 139, 140, 143, 164. Is there anyone here who's ever been a witness at trial? Meaning you've had to go in and the jury was there, or maybe it was just a judge, but you've been in the box and been sworn and you gave testimony. Anybody been a witness? 140, 152, 158, 170. Please raise your hand if you yourself have ever taken it upon yourself to go and investigate a crime. 158. Do you know anybody who has taken it upon themselves to go ahead and investigate a crime? 158. All right. So first off, I'm going to have you look around the room. Do you guys, anybody know anybody else? I mean, jurors, do you know each other? So 172 and 164 and 158. Now, remember Monday? I know it seems like it was forever ago. When you showed up at Selden Park, did you also recognize people you knew over there? So we have 138, 140, 146, 148, 161, 164, and 172. Do you or anyone in your household own a firearm? And that can be a handgun, rifle, shotgun. 139, 140, 143, 146, 150, 156, 158, 160, 161, 164, 167, 170, and 176. Is there anyone here who's ever carried a gun as part of their job or employment? 139, 143, 158, and 167. Is there anyone here who's had non-military training in firearms, like you took a class? 139, 140, 143, 156, 158, 167, 170. All right, please raise your hand if you have lived in Glenn County, this area, for less than 5 years. 139, 156. Is that 175? 175 and 176. Does anyone here currently reside in the Satilla Shores neighborhood? No cards. Anyone previously resided in Satilla Shores? No cards. Is there anyone here who especially is familiar with the location due to having family or friends who live in Satilla Shores? 146. Is there anyone here who currently lives in Royal Oaks? Has anyone previously lived in Royal Oaks? No cards. Is there anyone here especially familiar with Royal Oaks because they have friends or family members who live there? 172. Is there anybody familiar with the road Boykin Ridge, which is over in the Fancy Bluff neighborhood. So is there anybody who currently lives in Fancy Bluff? Anyone who's previously lived in Fancy Bluff? Anyone who's familiar with Fancy Bluff? Because friends or family are just especially familiar. So 146, 164, 172. Is there anyone here who has a particular religious, moral, or ethical conviction that would keep you from passing judgment on another person? And what I mean by that is this, because you all know yourselves. That means you're selected to be on this jury, you hear all the evidence in the case, you go back with the other 11 people to deliberate, and you are never going to reach a verdict. You're just never going to do it. You're never going to say guilty, not guilty. Because that's all you're going to be asked to do. Guilty, not guilty. But because you have a moral, ethical, or religious conviction, you're not going to be able to do that. Come back with a verdict. Is there anyone here who feels that applies to them? 172. Does anyone have a private reason for not being able to deliberate with others and pass judgment with a verdict? No cards. All right, this is a reverse question. Is there anyone here who does not belong to any sort of organization? What I mean by that is you don't belong to a social, fraternal, or religious organization. No church, synagogue, mosque. You don't belong to a bowling league, bridge club. You don't belong to like the American Marketing Association, yet marketing is your job or profession. You just don't belong to any sort of social group. No book clubs, no nothing like that. Anybody that applies to. So we have 138, 139, 150, 167, and 176. Please raise your card or hand if you have a close relative, close personal friend, or you yourself who's ever been arrested and you thought the circumstances of that arrest, that what happened was the police didn't treat that person fairly or the criminal justice system didn't treat that person fairly. 152, 175. Please raise your card or your hand if you, a relative, or a close personal friend has ever been arrested for kidnapping or false imprisonment. No cards. Please raise your hand if you, a relative, or a close personal friend has ever been arrested